said when we came in today, we wrestled and thought about, we talk about kind of storm recovery and how God was with us in the storm. I just want to move on with life and kind of get back to a sense of normal. So we're going to start this series, Reframing the Modern Family. It actually began several months ago. I did a sermon on worries. I may not remember this, about God's got this. Put all your worries in God's box. And we did a thing about 6 months ago. I asked you to take something that you were worried, your number one worry, your stress, to write it out on a piece of paper, put it in a box, pray over it, and let it go. And then you're going to bring up a slip up here and put it in a box up here. I had a big box that says, God's got this. And you're just going to give it to God and move on. And I told you I was going to read what was in the box. So I did. The number one worry, the number one stress across the board, I mean light years ahead of everything else, more than double everything else, I'm worried about my children or my family. Children or our family cause us a lot of stress. And so that's what we're going to talk about over the next several weeks. We're going to be looking at these worries that we have with our family and our children and talking about it. And this is going to be our theme verse over the next several weeks. It comes from Matthew chapter 5. It's what we call the Beatitudes. This is a modern translation because sometimes we read blessed. And sometimes the modern translations don't get it quite right. Because happy kind of feels like it sort of comes and goes. Blessed just sticks with you, all right? But it says, happy are, or blessed are people who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, because they will be fed until they are full. That's going to be our theme as we start talking about reframing the modern family. Happy are people, blessed are people who hunger and thirst for righteousness, because they will be filled. That's what we want to talk about. And so I know some people say, we're going to talk about family values. Nope, not talking about family values. People, we need to get back to biblical family values. Nope. Don't think you've read the Bible then. Then people in the Bible, they got some jacked up families. I mean, there's not a family in the Bible I want, they have their act together. And one of the problems I always talk about, and why we're calling it reframing the modern family, is because the church has done a horrible job over the years of framing the family. Because the church, the Christian movement, talks about the family as this way. There's a mom and a dad and 2.5 kids. I don't know where the 0.5 came from, but there's a 0.5 kid and a dog. Never a cat, by the way. Have you noticed that? It's always which is probably good, but it's 2.5 kids and the dog. That's not the family. Family is how you define it. And we got all kind of different representation of families up here. Families are across the board. However, I don't care how, I do care how you define it, but it doesn't matter how you define family. Well, families, I wrote down different families that we got. Families, how you define it. They're single and no kids, divorced, remarried, married with kids, married, no kids, grandparents raising kids, gay families, single mom families, single dad families, widow families, mine, yours, and ours. And some of us even have families that aren't biological. I got an Uncle Bill. It took me years to realize he's not related to us. We're not blood kin, but I've called him Uncle Bill my whole life, right? There are all these different, it doesn't matter how you define family. So however you define family, whatever means family for you, however you define it, you worry about it, don't you? You stress about your family. You want your family to be blessed. And in fact, most of us want to frame our family with love and joy and peace and patience and happiness and goodness and faithfulness and self-control. We want our families framed with kind of the fruit of the Spirit. That's how, whatever your family, and we stress and we worry about our families. And actually, most of our stress and our worries is we want God to fix our family, right? Mainly God needs to fix them, whatever that kid is you're really thinking about right now, right? God needs to fix them. And here's my struggle. If God would just listen to my prayers, because I have given God some really good advice on what God needs to do for my family. And that's my struggle is that, God, you're not doing what I ask you to do to fix them. Just do it this way. And then that made me think of something else. Several years ago, one of our sons was having a horrible, terrible, no good Alexander kind of year. Not just a day. It was a whole year in middle school. And Chris decided it'd be good for our family to do some counseling. And so we went to see a guy named David Uwima. Still talk to him kind of regularly. He's a counselor over in Osceola County. Works with the school system. So our family goes in to meet with him to do some counseling because a middle school kid is going nuts. And we go in and we meet for 5 minutes as a family. I'm like, oh, that's all right. And then he takes our son and he meets with our son. I'm like, yes, pound it into him. Get him straight, right? Meets with him for about 5 minutes. And then Chris and I go in for 40 minutes. And I'm like, I'm not the problem. He's the problem. You need to fix him. We don't need to be working on us. So the next week or a couple weeks later when we went back and we did the same routine, about 5 minutes with the family, about 10 minutes with our son, and then about 30 more minutes with Chris and I. I'm like, let me tell you something, David. We're not the ones with the problem. He's the one with the problem. And I'll never forget how David said, he goes, but you're the adult. And he went, you can't fix him. You can't change him. You can't make him. Maybe you can work on you, and let's see what happens. And about that time, I was reading a book called Anatomy of Peace. I had to reread it this year because I'm part of a program dealing with reconciliation and conflict management, how to handle conflict. And we're reading this book called Anatomy of Peace, and they talk about the pyramid of peacemaking. And at the top of the pyramid of peacemaking is this little tiny triangle. And that's the triangle of correcting and training and all of this. And they say that's where we spend the most amount of time. Let me tell you what you need to do. I'm going to fix you. I'm going to train you. I'll show you. And the guy said, that's where we spend all of our time, when really where we should be spending most of our time is down here in the bottom levels, building the relationships, and less time telling people what to do and more time working on this, which is what we're going to do in this series. Because we all want, I refuse to believe you're here and you don't want your family to be framed by love and joy and peace. I don't believe you're here and you're going, I don't care if God's in my family or not. I believe we're all here for that. The question is, are you willing to work on it? Are you willing to pursue it? Are you going to hunger and thirst for righteousness? Are you willing, because for your family to be blessed, you can't worry about them. You got to work on you. And are you willing to do that? That's what we're going to be looking at over the next. And so I know, I love the idea of, God, you just fix my family. I don't want to hear God going, you need to work on you. But to be blessed, you have to pursue. You have to hunger and thirst for righteousness. I mean, do you? In your home, what do you hunger and thirst for? What did you hunger the most? You know what you hunger the most for last week? Electricity. Didn't you? I mean, you think, just think about how you felt when the power went out. And how you crave that, and how addicted you were to those little cell phone thingies going, oh my God, the battery's at 20%, you start freaking out, right? Besides the hurricane, what in your house did you crave for this year? What is it that your house, what gets your most of your time and energy? Where do you put the most time and energy in? Because that's what you're craving. And if you're not sure what you're doing, and ask the people around you, the people you're closest to. They'll tell you what matters the most to you about where you spend your time and your energy. And if it's not God, if God's not first, if you're not pursuing God, if you are not hungering and thirsting for God and righteousness, see, righteousness usually means, it's associated with holiness. It usually means an understanding of living God's way or living God's plan. If you're not hungering and thirsting for God and you're not putting God first, don't expect your family to. And if you're not, however you define family, and if you're not doing it, I mean, if you hunger and thirst for God, you'll be filled. That's what the scripture says. But if you're not hungering and thirsting for God, if you're not seeking after God and you're expecting God to bless you and your family, it's sort of like eating pizza and ice cream and hoping to lose weight. You got to begin to change your diet, which is what I want us to look at about what does it look like for us to pursue righteousness, to hunger and thirst for righteousness as individuals, and that'll spread over into the family. And we've been thinking about that. I know two things that don't work. So today's going to be, here's a couple things don't do, and then a couple things let's do. I guess that's good English, do. Anyhow, two things that don't work. Legalistic Christianity doesn't work. That's you telling everybody else what to do. These are the rules, follow them. Now, you know the problem with that is rules without relationships leads to a third R, rebellion. So it's not about you, here are the things you need to do, because what I find interesting is generally the people that are telling everybody else what to do, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. But it's okay for me to slide a little bit on it, right? Case in point, I can't ever get on to my kids about getting a speeding ticket. They've ridden with me their whole lives. They understand that's just a suggestion, right? Can't expect them. A horrible moment during the hurricane. I don't know why my dad did this, but my dad got bored during the hurricane, so he started rereading his journals. And he called me. He goes, I forgot about some of your escapades in college. And he started listening to them. I'm like, no, you should burn those, Dad. You should, right? Here are all the rules. Here's what you need to do, but I'm not going to pay attention to them. It doesn't work. Neither does lukewarm Christianity. Lukewarm Christianity is kind of going through the motions and not really meaning it. Lukewarm Christianity, now be careful if I step on your toes, best thing to tell you to do is move them, all right? Lukewarm Christianity is showing up for church every week and never changing. Doing the same thing every week, right? Lukewarm Christianity is saying, I believe in God, but I'm not living like it matters. You go through the motions, but nothing ever changes. Craig Rochelle wrote a book kind of a little bit about this, and had some great ideas about being a good Christian, but our lives never really change. He goes, how do you know you're struggling with this? Here are some key indicators. When was the last time you prayed together as a family? I'm not talking about around a table, God, thank you for this food and the bread that we eat. Well, when's the last time you as a family, however you define family, when's the last time you prayed about it? I'll admit it. The last time I prayed, as Chris and I pray, is when she tells me, and she does it every time, and she's not here, is she? Excellent. Okay, she does it every time. I will lay down, my head will hit the pillow, and she'll say, I'm really worried about blah, 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 one of our kids. We should pray. I'm like, right? But we want God to be first in our family, but we as a family don't pray about it. When's the last time you talked about your faith with family? That you actually said, in reading, you ever uttered this with your family? In reading my Bible today, one of the things that spoke to me in my Bible was, or when I was praying, or I just feel like God leading me, we want God to fix our family, don't we? We want God to frame our family, but hunger and thirst for righteousness means that we'll have a conversation. I'll tell you, I realized when I was writing this out, one of the biggest moments for me was 4 years ago when I met with my boys and said, I feel like God is calling me to move. And that's really going to impact your lives. What do you think? Open up a whole new discussion of faith in our family. When's the last time you as a family, however you define family, whatever that looks like for you, had a conversation about what was God doing in your life? Here's where I saw God today. Another one that Craig wrote down that was really interesting, and the one I struggle with is, when's the last time you let God lead you to do something or to not do something? And Craig Rochelle writes in the book, he talks about, the last time, I don't go see sexually explicit movies. And I'm like, check, I got that one, I do that one pretty good. He's like, and he talks about that in the book, and that's something I'll admit, I'm pretty good about it. I try not to watch sexually explicit. Like, I really think I'd love Game of Thrones. It seems to be right up my alley to watch the show Game of Thrones. But the first 2 episodes I saw were so sexually graphic. It's Lord of the Rings with booty shots pretty much the whole time. I was like, I can't watch this. I'm pretty good on that, but then I can watch some violent stuff. I seem to be fine with it. Like, I watched Gladiator. I've never wanted to chop somebody's head off, right? But then Chris and I were watching the show the other day, and they were dropping language left and right. They were using words left and right. I'm like, that's no big deal, no big deal. But then I find my language. And then we had somebody staying with us during the hurricane who's young, she's a freshman in college. And she's old enough to hear all these words all the time. But these words are dropping left and right in the TV. I'm like, and by the way, y'all certainly wouldn't want me to use those words Sunday morning, right? When's the last time you said, hey, I can't do this? I can't go to Hooters. They have great wings there. They don't. Hooligans got better wings, trust me, right? All right? But when's the last time you said, I can't do this because I follow Jesus Christ? If you've never uttered that, don't expect your family to either. In giving, when's the last time you talked to your family about what you do with your finances? About how you put God first in your finances. I remember there was a moment in college, I came home and Daddy was paving. We have a long driveway, like a 1/4-mile driveway up to our house. And my whole life growing up, we had lime rock that sucker. And one of my jobs was to pound down the lime rock and to drive it over the tractor and all this. I'm in college and Daddy's paying for that thing to be asphalted. And I wasn't in college, I was in seminary because I was all spiritual and righteous. And I'm like, you know what? This is a waste of money. You could be feeding children. Da, 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 da. And he said, boy, don't you tell me what to do with my money. I have been blessed. And I am a blessing. Here's what we do with and he went through, this is all the things I do with my money. I was like, maybe seminary boys should just shut up and watch a little bit more, right? Have you talked to your family about this is why I give? By the way, you know something's fixing to happen in the world. It's the largest shift of wealth in the history of the human world. As one generation is dying out and the other generation is coming out, one generation does really good about giving. The other generations don't. Want to know why? We never had the conversations with them. I'll tell you, Caleb's got his first job. My oldest son's got his first job sitting down talking about budget stuff. I'm like, here's the deal. This is how much you get paid. This is how much you tithe. He goes, that's a lot. I said, no, it's not. It's 10%. Just do it right now. Do it as soon as you can. Start. That's what we've done. We've done it our whole lives. And by the way, you don't give and God goes, oh, you gave, here's $1 million. But you give, somehow you get blessed. Talk to your families about it. Those are things that don't work. Legalistic Christianity, lukewarm Christianity. By the way, you know, that's the harshest thing I think Jesus says is about people who are lukewarm. People who show up on Sunday mornings and say they believe in God but live as though it doesn't matter. They're the ones in Revelation says, Jesus says, be hot or cold. If you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out. So what does work? These are overly simplistic. I wrote them down. I want to make sure I get them right. They're overly simplistic. I get that. It's about seeking and pursuing righteousness, putting God first in all that you do on that. The first one is God first. Just make that a priority. And you're doing that by coming to church, but just simply God first. Everything we do, we center around God. When I meet with couples talking about getting married, I'm like, don't put God as part of your marriage. And they look at me kind of strange, like, God isn't in the center. Everything else circles around. Not just a part that you do on Sunday morning, but your whole life around that. Psalm 63 says this, my God, it's you I search for. My whole being thirsts for you. My body desires you in a tired and dry land, no water anywhere. That's David writing that in the desert. It doesn't make sense for us. We don't get that. But you get this, wouldn't you? My God, I need you like the internet. I need you like that electricity. On Tuesday night, God, when that electricity wasn't working and I had no air conditioning and I thought I was going to pass out from heat, may my soul want you as much as I wanted air conditioning during the storm. You think about that. Do you miss God the way you missed air conditioning? Do you long for God the way you long for that hot shower after the storm? If you haven't thought about it that way, don't get upset when the family's not framed. Put God in your daily conversations. That's your goal for the next couple of weeks. Every day, say something about God in your conversations with family. Where did you see God this week? How did you experience God? What was one thing God worked? Or it can be just, that today I prayed. In my prayer, I prayed for this. In my prayer, I prayed for this. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, since the boys were young, I have been praying for their spouses. Because Lord knows we ain't an easy family to be part of. I've been praying, and my oldest son, he's done well. And my middle son came home with a girl, which is not unusual. It's more like a flavor of the month with him, but we have one that came home, and he goes, I don't know what I'm going to do, Dad. I really like her. I'm like, really, what do you like about her? He goes, she said, if God's not part of my life, I'm not part of her life. And I was like, yes. Right. And I said, well, Josh, your mom has not been praying for that for years. You better be careful. And he goes, really? I said, well, yeah. I said, by the way, my mama did the same thing, and look what happened with me, right? That's the way it works. Do you have that? I had that conversation with him. That's what I've been praying for you for. This is where I saw God. This is where I've experienced. Have you had those conversations? You want God to be part of your family, but you're not going to talk about God with your family? And I get, we talked about this Thursday night. Family can be so stinking hard to talk to about God. Oh, Lord, here we go. There's Mom again, Miss Religious. Right, there's Dad. Just be authentic. This is where God's working in my life. I think it's fine to say this. I've been praying. I don't know why God hasn't answered this prayer yet, but I'm still praying it. It doesn't always have to be wonderful. It can be, I've lifted this up to God and I'm worried about it. But have that conversation. This is where, You should at least be able to say, God was with me this morning because I woke up and I saw the green side of the grass. It's a good day. You know? Number 3, you kind of already got, but I'm going to push this a little bit. Make worship non-negotiable. Every Sunday, worship. Or Thursday night, we got Thursday night service. You're like, well, we're here. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but here's the deal. You want God to be first in your family, but you can't work out an hour a week? All right. You have to drive Granada an hour and a half a week. You can't work that out. You can't, well, so I'm just really busy. I need my rest. We've got so much going on. We've got this happening. Okay, well, understand, you're showing where your priorities are. I'll tell you, apple, it don't fall far from the tree. A few weeks ago, I was watching a football game, the only game my team's played this year. It was not a good game. But my oldest son came home with his girlfriend that we think is kind of moving into that fiance age area. And Chris goes, have you watched a game with Scott yet? And she went, no, I'm a little nervous. And Chris was like, you should be. And we're 5 minutes into the game, and that Alabama running back hit our linebacker, and our linebacker just fell down. And I said some things to him through the TV that he needed to hear to coach him better, all right? And I am full out volume and everything, and poor little Megan's like this. 5 minutes later, right over there, my son standing up, yelling, pointing, and Megan looks at him and he goes, he taught me everything. Right? Families watching you, they learn from how you do it. Worship's not important to you, worship's not important to them. You come up with every reason why you can miss, so can they. Well, I'm going to be out of town. We got Thursday night. Come and join us then. It ain't that bad. Something else we're getting ready to do about putting God first. We're going in October. We're going to offer some opportunities for growth groups. My sermon series in October is going to be tied into a book talking about marks of a Methodist, and we've got sign up. If you want to join a group, not everybody wants to be part of a group. I get that. But if you want to be part of a group, you want to say God matters enough to me that I'm going to take it one step further and sign up for a group. I want to grow in my faith. I want you to do that. I want you to think about that. And that says something to your family when you say, hey, well, aren't you going to watch the football game this afternoon? No, I've got a growth group I got to go to. I want to deepen my faith. Dad, why are you leaving the house at 6 o'clock this morning? Well, I got to get to a Bible study. I want to grow in my faith. That shows something. I mean, you can't fix them. You can't make them. You can't change them. But you can work on you. And when you pursue righteousness, when you hunger and thirst for righteousness, you'll be blessed. You worry about them, and you pursue righteousness. Now, here's the deal. I want to be honest with you, which generally most pastors should be. That's just a buzz phrase I don't like. Let me be honest with you as though I've been lying the whole other time. You can do everything right. You can pursue God with your whole heart. You can pursue righteousness. You can hunger and thirst for righteousness. You can do everything I told you to do, and still they may not become who you want them to. They may not. That may happen. But I've learned you'll be blessed. It may not work out the way you want it to, but somehow, when you seek God, no matter what else happens in that framing of the family, there's a blessing that occurs. Paul wrote it this way to Timothy. But as for you, man of God. Now, he was writing to Timothy, so he said man of God. But if he was writing to some of y'all, he'd say, but as for you, man of God or woman of God, run away from all these things. Instead, pursue righteousness, holy living, faithfulness, love, endurance, and gentleness. You want your family to be framed? Seek first God. Hunger and thirst for righteousness. All that other stuff falls into place. But it starts with a real simple choice. Joshua talked about it this way. He says, as for me and my house. Notice, he didn't say as for you. He didn't say for them. He said, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's the choice. So you want your family to be blessed? You can't worry about them. You pursue righteousness. Maybe that begins today in communion as you come forward. However you define family, whatever that looks like for you, we all want our families to be blessed and whole and pure. We all want our families to have love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and self-control. We all want, however you define it, this is what we want. It starts with your choice to hunger and thirst for righteousness. Because you will be fed. On the night in which he gave himself up for us, he took bread and he gave thanks and he broke it. And he gave it to his disciples and he said, take and eat. This is my body which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And when the supper was over, he took a cup and he gave thanks unto God. And after giving thanks, he gave it to his disciples and he said, drink from this, all of you. This is my blood, the blood of the new covenant poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. Do this as often as you should drink of it in remembrance of me. So today we come in remembrance of all that God has done for us. We come in remembrance that we have been blessed by family. Sometimes it's biological, but as I was thinking about this, some of my family members were Sunday school teachers and youth group counselors and mamas who weren't my mama, but they acted like my mama and helped raise and shape me. I have been blessed that way. And I hope that I will be a blessing. But it only occurs when I pursue righteousness. Not when I want them to be better, but when I hunger and thirst to live God's way. So as you come forward for communion today, may that be your prayer. God, let me hunger and thirst for you. Let me crave you. God, the way I can't wait to dig my fork into some Peach Valley peach cobbler. Crave that, don't you? God, may I want you as much as I want a hot shower. And then we'll go from there. Let's pray. God, we just ask that you pour out your Spirit on us gathered here on these gifts of the bread and the cup and make them be for us the body and blood of Christ. That as we feast on them, we might experience your love and your grace. God, we're here today because we love you and we want our lives to change and we want to seek you, but we also have plans for our family and we wish you could work that out. We worry about them. We miss them. We give thanks for family members who have gone on before. But for those of us who are left here now, may we hunger and thirst for you. And as you fill us, may the blessings abound. We pray this prayer in the name of Jesus, who taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.